Welcome to the Decent Crypto Podcast. Today is Sunday, December 4th. We are live from New York City here with Matthew Blumberg. Matt, how you doing today?
I'm a little tired. It's been a big week, as they say.
It's been a big week.
Happy birthday to Karan. He is now 78 years old.
Thank you. Yes, Mom, I've been trading crypto for 5 years. I look great. Yeah, it was a big week. It was a nice weekend. Thanks for all the boys and girls for coming out. It's a nice, fun celebration. But that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about another celebration happening at the New York Times. A celebration of Sam Bankman-Fried, everybody. Yeah, what is this? What exactly is happening, Matt?
Okay, so the New York Times had its annual Deal Book Summit, which
it's like three of the most irrelevant words mashed together. Deal Book Summit. What does that even
mean? we brought together thought leaders in the finance space, and there was a fair amount of a little bit of backlash, a little bit of uproar, a little bit of hubbub around whether or not SBF was actually going to do this interview that he had previously scheduled with the New York Times. And he said, look, this is against the advice of my lawyers, which we can get into whether or not we believe that. But I'm going to do this interview regardless. And so he went on, and I think he spoke for a little over an hour, just about all sorts of lies, or mistruths, as we might call them.
Alternative facts.
It's worth touching briefly on, this is just the latest in Sam Bankman-Fried's media circus, right? He is really making the rounds really quickly and effectively, doing the opposite of what we saw a lot of players in the space do following their shutdowns earlier this year. So 3AC, we got one tweet from them, we are working, we are in, what was it, in the process of talking with the affected parties and hope to reach good outcomes soon or something. Yeah. And then radio silence, right? Do Kwon, similarly, just huge press tour going into the collapse of Luna and UST, but then pretty much radio silence thereafter. And Sam has been basically doing the exact opposite, going very much on the offensive, publishing fluff piece after fluff piece, doing interviews with, the New York Times did one piece. It's kind of interesting, right? Because when you do as a responsible journalist, when you do something like this, you're supposed to get at least one other person to weigh in, just as a source check or whatever. But they didn't. They had zero comments from anyone but SBF on the fluff piece.
Right. So here's the thing: the reason he's doing all this is because all these journalists that he talks to, all these people so far that he's been on, even these Twitter Spaces he's doing with random crypto scammer people, whatever. Or Andrew Ross Sorkin, who's the guy that hosted this from the New York Times. They're not very knowledgeable about the space. The reason he's doing this is because he's much smarter than them, and he can control the narrative, right? He can go in there. He knows he has no other people that are going to try and go at the stuff he's saying, nor in many cases can they understand the stuff he's saying. And so he knows he can just do that. And so while that's the case, he's just going to keep doing this. So he knows if he can't win in the court of law, he's going to have to try and win in the court of public opinion. And the way to do that is to make things seem super complicated and make it seem like the people who are asking you the questions are actually the ones that are in the wrong or stupid or
this is a very classic crypto messaging approach, right? Think about all the times you've been on Twitter and people are just yeah, man, without telling you which coin, this one's going to the moon, right? You'd have to be crazy to fade this. And then just are you really going to miss out on the trade of the year, Anon? it's just like a fair amount of like gaslighting or like trying to make you feel like you don't know as much as the people who are informed. And you know, it's enormously frustrating, right? Because like, to, you know, just my background, right? Like, I'm largely a self-taught programmer. I took like one class and then like worked in the coding space for like 5 years, right? And none of this stuff is as hard as it seems, right? And so nothing like really grinds my gears quite like people trying to make things seem harder than they actually are, because all of this is supposed to be about like inclusion and like going mainstream, wider adoption, peer-to-peer, like, you know, decentralized finance, like no trusted third party, like access, right? And this is just like the exact opposite of that, is like sending out this messaging that like, you don't understand how margin trading works, right? You don't understand how liquidations work. Our liquidation engine was state of the art. Maybe.
Yeah.
And so it's frustrating to see this, just on a personal level, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I also think that at some point people have to stop, you know, giving airtime to somebody who's quite clearly committed, you know, engaged in criminal activity. I don't know what is committed, but yeah. So
I mean, it is
yeah,
interesting, right? Because we haven't even seen the words like, you read any of these pieces, even out of like slightly less biased publications like the Wall Street Journal, and the word allegedly never appears, right? Whereas like with most people that are like at least implied to have committed fraud and like financial crime, you'd at least have like allegedly in there somewhere. It just feels like mainstream journalism is like really dropping the ball on this. So what
yeah,
do
I
we
don't
get?
know. Yeah, I don't know. Do you think this is because he's so tied into all these groups, right? Like Elon tweeted yesterday that SBF probably donated close to $1 billion to politicians, not the few $1,000,000 that he stated. So it's like, is he just so deep state? Like, I don't know how you get so deep state in a couple of years, but where he just has immunity from all media and all political groups, or is it? I have no idea.
I mean, you know, it's in the US, right? Like, our justice system is largely unaffected or unelected public officials, right? Like, you can vote for like your like local judges, right? Your local DAs, but you can't vote for, say, the Supreme Court, or like a fair amount of the SEC, or like any of like the financial crimes like regulators, right? So, you know, I'm usually not, believe it or not, one to really engage in alternative facts or like deep state conspiracy theories. But even I'm sitting here like, am I living in an alternative reality where like SBF did it? Like, you know, it seems like very clear that like, how else could this have possibly happened? Like, you start looking at the
Yeah.
facts, you're like, all right, like FTX like made loans to Alameda, which in turn made loans in the billions of dollars to entities that were fully 100% owned by Sam Bankman-Fried. And like, from the fact pattern, it looks pretty clear what happened. But from the media, you know, you could look at it and think to yourself, oh, this is just a kid that got himself like in over his head.
100%. Like, if you were not super in on this, like, you would just think like, man, like, I don't know what to think of this situation. Like, such a shady industry. This good kid just like got corrupted and, you know, lost a bunch of money. Like, that looks like the narrative that the mainstream media is trying to paint. And it seems like it's very intentionally done, right? It's like, you wouldn't expect the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and all these other big media groups to all be aligned on this one thing, where if you're even slightly aware of the facts, like, you just know that's the exact opposite of the true story. So it's just such a weird, like, mind-breaking moment, right? Where it makes you not only question, but just almost like mentally revolt against any other like facts or news that you see out there. It's just like, what is going on here?
You feel like you're being gaslit, right? Like, you're being led into like questioning your own sanity. It's absolutely absurd.
Yeah. And here's the thing, like you said, right? The Supreme Court is appointed, not elected. Most of our judges are same way, right? Like, so there is hope in the American justice system that, you know, you can't just buy your way out of jail time, right? Like Bernie Madoff still saw jail time. Elizabeth Holmes just got sentenced, right? So whether or not he gets jail time is not obviously for me to decide, but there's still hope that the American justice system can, you know, play a role here. That's we've not even gotten anywhere near that stage, right? So, but the thing that's very clear is that, you know, mainstream media, whatever kind of form that still exists in, is just so dead beyond dead and just so irrelevant, right? Like the best pieces on this have been written by CoinDesk and even like Vox. Like Vox was like, the thing they wrote wasn't even bad. Like it was mostly just screenshots, but it's pretty good. And it's like Vox is a new age kind of media group. Like I think they got bought out by somebody, but still, like so I don't know. Like I think the SBF part of it just at this point we don't really have new facts. We don't have that much new that's come out. He said that he's just on a media tour saying the exact same thing, right? Nothing's really come out. I think the bankruptcy process is just starting. It's going to take months, years to really play out, but this media campaign is the thing that's, I think, most interesting so far, at least since the last time we talked about this, and just the framing of it all. It's just wild to see.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to touch on, I guess, a few things that SBF mentioned in this interview. So the first one is FTX US, right? So he's been like pretty adamant that like FTX US should have been solvent. He's like, we never should have declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy. I did it under duress by my bankruptcy lawyers. And had I not done that, FTX US customers would have been able to like withdraw their funds by now. Do you think that that's like him trying to ingratiate himself with like at least like the US domiciled entities that were affected, so that you know, it's a little bit of like not in my backyard, right? Where, well, I'm unaffected because I'm an FTX US customer, so I don't really care if my like local justice system actually pursues SBF for financial crimes. Like what do you think is the angle there?
In the most weird way, I almost believe that part. Like I mean, as a user, like it worked well for me, but also like, I don't know. I just think that our financial regulations in the US are decent, you know, like you kind of have to do a lot. Having worked at multiple exchanges, like, you know, operating the US it's not easy. So for them to have gotten certain licenses and to be able to operate in a certain way, like I think that there probably were solvent. I actually do believe that. I would have expected that for the bankruptcy part of it. I don't know how bankruptcy filings really work, but it's like I would expect that whoever is coming in and purchasing these assets, like they would buy FTX US for the customer base and the assets that they still have as part of the bankruptcy negotiation or something like that. And also as a part of the way to make the rest of their customers whole. Like I don't really know, but
it is strange that it was included in the Chapter 11 filings, right?
Yeah. So
It feels like they
know.
went with like a zero COVID kind of policy, where it's just like anything that was touched by SBF just like declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy,
except for his personal companies.
Yeah, they're solvent.
Yeah, they are solvent.
What do you make
So,
of some
yeah.
of the responses to this stuff on Twitter? Like, did you catch any of the like Bill Ackman, I think, saying like,
Oh
call
God.
me crazy, but I believe this guy just like got in over his head, like after seeing that interview. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean Bill Ackman, like fuck that guy. Yeah, I don't know. Like Bill Ackman, who's the other one? Oh, Kevin O'Leary. Yeah, like fuck them,
Oh
dude. Like
God,
they probably
yeah.
are just like this is where it's like, this is where I think you should really be engaging in deep state conspiracies. You know, there's like you just gotta like kind of play with it. You know, I don't know. Kevin O'Leary is probably tied in some way to Sam's dad or something like that, and just got to defend their boy's name, and you know, I don't know, like, dude, his dad being connected to like Gary Gensler and to like the whole MIT org and all that shit. He's probably tied in with a lot of these people, you know? And so there's probably quite a few people that are going to defend him.
Yeah. But what do you think about the narrative that he's trying to spin around margin and like people having taken on margin positions and therefore that's why he lost their capital? Do you think this is all just like him attempting to like over complicate the story so that fewer people are able to follow the thread? Like,
yeah, I mean, that's just a ridiculous thing to say. Like his whole thing for years and years and years was about how their margin system was infinitely better than everybody else, how the whole crypto industry was so stupid, how they didn't have any idea how to build like a proper margin system. And so like some of the stuff he's saying is just so like preposterous that it's not even worth mentioning in my mind, where it's like, oh, we just mislabeled the account and so like $5 billion went missing. Oh, like, yeah, you know, people were taking on too much margin. And so like, yeah, we couldn't handle it. Some of those things, it's just like, I get it that why he's trying to spin that, right? But to me, it's like the journalists need to do a better job of wholeheartedly and like really firmly saying like, and like coming in with facts and being like, dude, you very, very clearly don't believe this stuff because of this, this, and this. Like, let's move past that to some actual substance. Like every interview I've watched, it's basically the same thing, right? It's like the New York Times one, he said the same thing. Which one did he go on? CNBC, basically the same thing. What he's going on the Block tomorrow. That one might be interesting because Frank and him are like boys from back in the day. So,
whoa, really?
Yeah, dude, he's been on the Block like 5 times. So that one will be super interesting.
I mean, I do think that Frank Chaparro is one of the better journalists in the space, and I think he's done a very good job of like covering this sort of stuff, and like responsibly like breaking news when it seems like there's enough like fact to substantiate it without like spreading a bunch of rumors. Like I think Frank has been like the golden follow on Twitter throughout all of this. Yeah. I remember he tweeted like last week, he was like, yeah, it would be good to get like a crypto native journalist like actually running the interviews here. Because clearly like the people that Sam's been interacting with like don't understand this as well as the users that were actually impacted. So that'll be something to look out for sure.
Yeah. I'm not going to shill anyone here, but I would like to see him go on Up Only, which he'll never do because Kobe is actually a smart person.
Yeah. So is Ledger, for that matter.
Yeah, Ledger's great. I love that guy. Okay, let's move on from SBF. Fuck him. Okay. There's some cool stuff did happen this week, Matt. If you are a degen trader, you'll have some more tools to play with. Uniswap announcing its NFT play. So they acquired Genie.xyz a couple of months back, which is a aggregator, NFT aggregator. So, you know, if you want to make trades at, you know, kind of look out for best pricing, you can connect to OpenSea, you know, LooksRare, SudoSwap, all these different exchanges and make your trades all in one place. They have pretty cool, you know, kind of smart contracts where you can buy a bunch of different stuff all in one transaction. So that has all now been integrated into Uniswap. So if you go to their app, there's a tab for NFTs. We were playing around with this earlier today. What did you think?
It looks uncannily like OpenSea. Like all of the CSS, the whole interface just looks and feels exactly like OpenSea. Super easy to use. I'm a huge fan. I think it works really well. I never used Genie. I have used Gem like quite a bit, but I actually find that the user experience here is slightly better. You know, one interesting thing is that Genie had announced that they were going to do an airdrop right before they got acquired. And Uniswap said, look, we're going to honor the airdrop request. we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna give out $5 million worth of like USDC
Mm-hmm.
to all of the like historic users of Genie. I thought that was really interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because it's an airdrop, but not in the form of like a protocol native token. It's just in
Mm-hmm.
the form of USDC.
Very smart, in my opinion. You don't need to be launching tokens and come back getting hit with securities laws, fines. So yeah, did Genie ever announce the actual token? Or I remember the CEO tweeting out $Genie.
Yeah, that was the announcement.
That's the announcement of the announcement.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun thing to play with. I don't know how much I'm going to use it just because, well, actually, I don't trade much. Do you think you're going to be using this?
I actually, believe it or not, this is the best aggregator that I've seen so far. So this is where I'm planning to trade on next time I buy an
Nice.
NFT.
Okay.
It's such a nice interface. The pricing is like very like, it's going to be top notch, right? Like they have more exchanges integrated than any other platform that I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I wanted to touch on briefly is that like in a lot of collections, right? Like the by far the cheapest like listing price is on Sudoswap or one of these
Mm-hmm.
other like zero royalties platforms.
Yeah.
What do you think the aggregator space, like you can see that like in the future, it's not going to be like people just going to OpenSea. You are going to go to an aggregator. Everyone's going to go to an aggregator. And at that point,
Mm.
the liquidity is aggregated across exchanges that pay royalties versus don't.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that does in the next cycle? Do you think like it's just over for royalties completely? And from now on, like people are generally just going to speculate on NFTs via platforms that don't enforce royalties? Or do you think like, yeah, like how do you think that plays out?
I think we get to a social consensus pretty soon here. Within the next year, we get to a social consensus exactly of how royalties are enforced. There's part of it that can be done on chain, right? So OpenSea announced this thing called the OpenSea royalty filter or whatever. It's basically just a little code snippet that you have to add in your smart contract, and if you add that, then OpenSea will honor the royalties for your whole collection. If you don't add it, then it's going to become a zero royalty platform, just like SudoSwap, right?
Hmm.
So, like people can choose to pay zero royalties if you don't include that code snippet, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah, like in that sense, it's definitely going to zero royalties on chain. Zero royalties like enforceable like on chain because it's not really enforceable on chain, right? You're
No,
gonna
it's
always
not.
have to
Yeah.
let people transfer NFTs from one wallet to another, which is essentially what's going on in a sale, right? Like you have a contract involved there. So I think that it has to come from like a social consensus. I think the way it happens is that zero royalty trades, like, they get treated differently by the collection itself. So they'll just say, like, if you don't pay royalties, you're not going to be eligible for future airdrops or for future engagements or whatever. You just get black sheeped.
Hmm.
There was one that I saw recently. Oh God, I'm forgetting the project name, but they were really experimenting with something cool. They were like, oh, it was the guy who created Minecraft. He has his own NFT collection. He was
Hmm.
like, basically, if you don't pay royalties, like you don't get. It is similar to what I'm saying, like no future airdrops, no like no participation in like their environment. You still get to own your, like, obviously they can't do anything about you owning the NFT or anything like that, but you basically get like socially ostracized.
Hmm. Um, it is interesting, right? Because historically, like a lot of the utility that projects have provided does come in the form of airdrops, right? And we've seen like a lot less of that, but initially, like the base case was sort of the Bored Ape model, where
Mm-hmm.
you have your like flagship, high value, like more expensive collection,
Mm-hmm.
10,000 of those, and then each of those like gets airdropped two of your next collection. So for the
Mm-hmm.
apes, that
You
was
get the
mutants,
mutant.
right? For Azukis, that was beans.
Mm-hmm.
And then for duplicator or for doodles, it was duplicators or who knows, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and then potentially like a third collection and a token, like a fungible
Mm-hmm.
token, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, you could imagine a world where like maybe it's just so yeah, so maybe what you do is like you penalize people that are not that like acquired their NFTs through zero royalty platforms or like without
Exactly.
paying royalties on the way. But you could also imagine that gets complicated, right? Like who is to say whether a transfer from one of my wallets to another one of my wallets is the same as like an OTC sale where like
Mm-hmm.
it's unclear whether I like, do I control both of those wallets? Like who knows, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, there's another architecture here, right?
Okay.
Where uh maybe everything just goes to zero royalties and uh you airdrop like the right to purchase the next collection, but the next collection in and of itself charges you for minting it. So for example, maybe you need a bored ape in order to mint two mutant apes, but
Yeah.
you still need to pay in order to get that done.
Right, right. Yeah. So it's basically the other thing I was going to say is like there's the airdrop model, and then the other version is the whitelist model. So basically, like you're saying, right? If you own a collection, you get whitelisted for the future thing, but you don't actually get it for free. Like
Hmm.
you have the right to be in the whitelist, right? Which is in many cases just as valuable because if it's the right whitelist, right, you get on it, the thing pumps, you get a 10x immediately or whatever, right? So
Yeah.
have being in the whitelist, like this is why I think like the social graph is really going to get built out from NFTs, right? Like participation in a project can easily be traced, and then you can get whitelisted for the next thing, or your wallet
Hmm.
can be used for a whole array of different things, right? A bunch of cool shit. So, um, yeah.
Hmm.
Anyways, I don't think our listeners wanted that, but yeah, you just got a nice NFT royalty discussion.
One more question. So what do you think about we've had a little bit of this debate before, but what do you do you think that the Uniswap, like obviously like Uniswap is great, right? It is the liquidity source for fungible tokens. It's just kind of won at a social consensus level. Um, what do you think about the like project specific marketplace thesis?
Hmm.
Where it's like, okay, Azuki wants to own the user experience for their project, so they're going to roll out a marketplace where you can buy and sell these things on their website, similar to like the Punks website, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously with Punks, like, and now look, like Punks are also integrated into
Mm-hmm.
the Uniswap like NFT like aggregator, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that this to me serves as like another nail in the coffin for this thesis that like I've been pretty vocal about saying, look, people don't want to go to like, most of the time they don't want to go to like a boutique NFT store. They don't want to
Mm-hmm.
go to the Shopify of NFTs. They want to go to the Amazon where like all of the
Mm-hmm.
liquidity is. Do you think yeah, like what do you think generally? Do
I
you think
was
this
So yeah, dude, I was actually gonna say I agree with all your points, and I literally came to the exact opposite conclusion. Where,
Hmm.
like, when you mentioned, like, look, Punk's marketplace is now integrated into Uniswap, right? So I almost see like this thing already playing out. Like if you look at gem.xyz or if you look at even Uniswap, right, and you look at all the marketplaces that are on there, there's already like over 20, right? Um, so once this Uniswap thing picks up, I could totally see a model where each of these Azuki, right? Like Azuki is the perfect model for this. If you go on Azuki, you have an Azuki, but if you go on there, right, they're building out this whole like collector page. They're building like a very like they have the gardens. They're building a very like unique digital experience for their holders and for people like to engage with on their site. Like it's beyond just going there for trading, but I could totally see them having their own marketplace that like is also a very much an owned experience. The marketplace, like really it's just a contract, right? They just
hmm
deploy the contract. You can interface with it on the Azuki website if you want to, But because of all these different aggregators, because there's Uniswap, because there's Gem, because like it's so easy to interact with any marketplace, right? Or with any aggregator, right? Like most people will still trade Azukis on Uniswap, but they can also go to the Azuki.com website, check it out, like play in the gardens, and then if they want, they can like buy a bean, right? Like, because Azuki will probably build a much cooler experience for you to interact with, even on their marketplace, right? You can view the traits in a much cooler way. You can see how it would look in different environments, like whatever. They're not going to leave that to Uniswap, but in terms of actual trading, like they know that the liquidity is all there, so they're going to want to tie into that aggregator. So
Interesting. So it renders the liquidity sort of like a fungible,
exactly,
like piece of backend infrastructure,
mm-hmm.
and then they build out the front end for
Mm-hmm.
the user experience that they want to provide.
Yeah.
And then they probably only interact with ones that like do pay royalties, or who knows, right?
Yeah, so the royalties, again, like they would be very much like socially enforced in some way, I think.
Well, you got to
And
imagine you go to
like,
the Azuki website, you click buy there. They're
mm-hmm.
probably not sourcing liquidity from someone like SudoSwap that's like not
Oh,
enforcing
no. Yeah,
royalties.
definitely not on the Azuki page. Yeah. And then they would probably only work with the aggregators, like you said, that are enforcing royalties in some kind of way.
Interesting.
I
You
don't know.
want to
Yet
touch
to be
on
seen.
the
Oh, yeah. What's the other Uniswap news this week?
more Uniswap news? So proposal went live, I want to say Friday afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the long-awaited on-chain vote for enabling the fee switch, right?
Mm.
So this obviously touches areas of like securities laws that like you and I are like not very informed about.
Mm-hmm.
But effectively, Uniswap is super successful, right? It generates a ton of fees. It generates them for liquidity providers, for the like Uniswap Foundation itself, like the treasury, right? But the fee switch is something that will like it's meant to like directly provide a little bit of value for Uni token holders. And what it does is for certain pools, it will enable it'll change it so that 10% of the fees that people who are swapping are paying, like buyers are paying, will go to Uni token holders, as opposed to just
Mm-hmm.
all going to the to liquidity providers.
Mm-hmm.
So the question and so the proposal is to enable it for ETH USDC, ETH USDT, and ETH DAI pools. Now the question is something like, is this going to incentivize liquidity providers to provide liquidity on a different platform, something like a Sushi Swap, for example? Or do you think like people are going to be okay providing liquidity even at a slightly lower like expected rate of like fee payment? Do you think they're going to be okay doing that on Uniswap still, or do you think we see like a liquidity exodus?
Yeah, I'm trying to think why people would stay, right? It's because most of the liquidity is there. So in terms of raw fees, you collect more, but in terms of percentage, you collect less.
Yeah, it's a bit of a
Mm.
prisoner's dilemma, right?
Yeah.
Where like every individual person sort of has the incentive to like go to Sushi Swap and like provide liquidity there instead, right? And
Mm-hmm.
look, yield farming has historically been a lot like this, because
Mm-hmm.
it generally hasn't been as dependent on like actual fees getting paid by users. It's been dependent on just like the protocols paying out tokens, right?
Right.
Um, but you might see a world where it's a little bit less mercenary, where as you were saying, like the raw revenue might still be higher on Uniswap.
Yeah.
If the liquidity remains there, then users are still going to go there to swap.
Mm-hmm.
And then like as a collective, your incentive is, or as an individual user at that point, even though as a collective, like the liquidity providers might be better off switching to Uniswap,
Mm.
right? Or switching to Sushi Swap. As an individual, nobody has the incentive to switch today,
Right.
right? Nobody has the
Mm-hmm.
incentive to be the first one to switch
Yeah.
to Sushi.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Hmm. I think with stuff like Sushi Swap, right? Like the reason that the liquidity is much higher on Uniswap is because it's a way better product. Um, at least if you ask me,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it offers more for the users. The reason Sushi Swap even picked up is because of its token incentives. And so I don't think that lasts, right? And so like I do think most users will stay on Uniswap.
Hmm.
I think the way it gets beat is if something comes along and builds something either equal or better, that offers some kind of value where you are also getting paid more, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, right? Because, you know, with the NFT product now, you're like, oh, Uniswap is just where I go to buy shit, right? It's just,
Yeah, exactly.
it's where I go to lose money, right?
Pretty much. Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty interesting.
Yeah. It's a great play, if you ask me. Like, because with NFTs, right, you have this definitely a big bifurcation, right, where a lot of people are using them to, flip, but a lot of people are just buying, holding, doing all their random stuff with them, just like playing around, minting, doing all this stuff. And so Uniswap being what it is, being a place for traders, it just makes so much sense to corner the market for speculators, like NFT speculators and traders and flippers, like, and doing it in a way where you don't really have to build out all this stuff and like build all these native experiences and things like that. Because clearly to me in the future, like NFTs are way more about, digital experiences and like kind of, community and ownership around that versus a lot of what fungible tokens were trading. And there's obviously a big part of NFTs that are about trading. And so like you just corner that market. So incredible move.
Yeah. Uniswap truly becoming the bazaar here, right? Like the place where you go to hustle. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Some guy tweeted out recently, like, I think you can list on one hand, the people who have actually built something useful in crypto. He was like, yeah, it's Hayden Adams, like the Stani, Ave, the compound guy, Vitalik, like Brian Armstrong. That's probably it. I was like,
Satoshi?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I guess he didn't include Satoshi in there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What about the Tornado Cash guy? He's still in prison.
Oh yeah, true. R.I.P. Dude, come back.
Yeah, he's being held without charges. I guess in the Netherlands you're alled to do that.
That's insane.
Yeah. Pretty bonkers.
No fly zone. Okay, cool. Let's move on. Uniswap, hats off, dudes. Okay, yeah, next one. Touching for me, Kraken, laying off over 1,000 people. Yeah, it really sucks.
Are these like too many customer support, sales, like client success people, or like business development, or like
not too many details, if you ask me. I've been seeing on my LinkedIn feed a lot of like people from the like HR or recruiting side, but I don't know.
I guess it makes sense if you're laying people off. You don't need as many people bringing new people in.
Right.
Yeah, that's tough to see, right? Kraken has been arguably like one of the marginal winners out of the whole FTX debacle, right? You got Jesse Powell going on like a big media tour around things like how to run a fucking exchange, right? Around like how to not steal client money when they like deposit it to your exchange, around like very pro self-custody, right?
Yeah.
Like Jesse Powell, Brian Armstrong, like people that have been in crypto for a while, also hold those like core beliefs in like self-custody, right? And it's not a source of revenue for the exchanges, so it makes a lot of sense actually to try to encourage people to self-custody and then use their exchange when they want to trade. So it's obviously like shitty timing for Kraken to be having to like cut jobs here.
Yeah, not great. Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of the industry is going to go through this still. I think, I don't know. Not like I have an opinion here. Okay.
Not hiring advice.
Yeah, not job advice. No. Okay. Bitcoin mining. Back to our favorite subject.
Dude, Bitcoin mining. Wild.
Getting more wrecked than maybe the NFT space. It's pretty intense right now. What happened this week?
I mean, so this week we've actually started to see something change, which is that hash rate is dropping. This has been pretty interesting, right? Is that we really haven't seen a substantial drop in hash rate, even though we've seen obviously like Bitcoin prices like collapsing, right? Part of that is due to like the fact that like there's just a lot of credit available, or there was a lot more credit available for Bitcoin miners over this cycle than there was last cycle, right? So if you wanted to like lever up on your expected future cash flows from mining, you could do that. You could take out loans against your Bitcoin, against your like future Bitcoin, whatever, and use that capital to buy more miners, to strike like higher capacity deals with like your local utility providers, and then that enables you to like get a little bit stronger like pricing power. And so there's been a bit of a delay function where for a little while everybody was still adding new miners online, right? They were still mining more than they were this time last week or last month or yesterday, right?
Like hash rate was hitting all-time highs while prices are just going down.
Yeah, and I mean that's brutal if you're in the if you're in the mining space, right? Because that directly increases the amount of like hashes you need to do in order to like mint your marginal Bitcoin.
Yeah, like you're earning less and you're spending more, essentially.
Yeah.
Not great for a business.
And so what we've seen is like pretty large scale miner selling of their Bitcoin, right? We've seen like a lot of Bitcoin get transferred to exchanges directly from miners, right? Like there's a guy, Will Clemente, who does a lot of like on-chain, like Bitcoin on-chain analysis, right?
Shout out Ramon, loves Will Clemente.
He does a pretty good job. Obviously, like there's not really that much you can do with on-chain analytics on Bitcoin because it's just transfers. But he's pushing it to the limits, man. And so Will Clemente flagging that like a lot of miners have been selling, pretty dramatic sale pressure. We've got public companies that are mining Bitcoin that are issuing warnings that like they may have to just like shut down operations. They may no longer be solvent. There are bills that they're like unable to pay, right? And so we're sort of starting to see the corner get turned here, where miners are not adding new hash power. In fact, they're taking miners offline, and so we're expecting to see the largest difficulty drop of 2022 coming in the next difficulty update. Should be something like 6 to 10% decrease in total difficulty, which represents like a pretty large percentage of like hash power just being taken offline. We got to wonder is like, are these miners that people are shutting down because they don't have access to like good electricity prices? And so are they going to like sell these machines to like stronger miners who are in better financial positions, have better long-term energy like pricing contracts? And so like, is this a temporary blip in hash rate? Or is this like closer to, a stickier change where in order to see these miners come back online, you just have to have higher Bitcoin pricing?
Yeah, I do think it's going to be the latter. And I think that the latter happens in a weird way when hash rate starts to go down, right? Because you can see the second and third order effects of this, right? Hash rate goes down, miners start earning more, miners have to sell less to cover their costs, so sell pressure goes down, right? So the general sell pressure that miners would, be putting on the market, which is quite a bit, is reduced, and so prices can start to rise a little bit. But I don't think
super different from the halvening, right?
Yeah, exactly, in a way, yeah. So I don't really quite think we're there, but that's that's how things generally start. Yeah.
It is interesting, this sell pressure thing, right? Like, have you checked out ultrasound.money recently?
No, but I know ETH is back to being inflationary.
It's just flipped the inflationary what do you call it, boundary?
Yeah.
So it was deflationary for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Following all the FTX drama.
Yeah, can you explain how all this happens? When it becomes inflationary, when it becomes deflationary?
Yeah, for sure. So there are really two core components to like ETH monetary policy right now. The first one is something called EIP 1559 that was introduced like middle of 2021, right? And what this does is every time someone sends a transaction, they have to pay gas fees, right? Some percentage of the fees are going to are getting burned now, decreasing the overall like circulating supply of ETH, right? Prior to EIP 1559, all the ETH went to the miners, right? Now some of it is getting burned. So that's like the first core component, right? Where if ETH is like in super high demand, you could imagine like overall like the total existing supply can decrease over time, right? If block space is like super expensive. There's another core component here though, which I think is kind of slept on, which is that since the merge, overall issuance of like gross issuance of ETH decreased by about 90%. Right. Because prior to the merge, we had to pay miners, and miners had like real like high electrical costs that they like needed to, we needed to like subsidize the security budget of the network effectively. And so in order to keep the miners up and running, you had to pay them ETH, and they had to sell the ETH right into the open market. Theoretically, decreasing ETH prices, right? So when like a 90% drop in issuance is pretty big, right? This is bigger than a Bitcoin halvening where it decreases by 50%, right? 90% is like two halvenings, right? Plus you have EIP 1559, which will substantially change the tokenomics, right? So obviously like ETH demand has been relatively low since there's like just not as much fun stuff to speculate on. And like that was really part of what, that was a huge part of like what drove like overall like high demand for block space in the network last year, right? But even with that, right, for say last week, the week before, you had a lot of people that were, and this wasn't like crazy like high gas prices or anything. It's just like a little bit more marginal demand to like move your ETH to cold storage or like take your ETH from one exchange and put it into another or whatever. Or like anytime there's like volatility, people are going to be like trying to like arbitrage like on chain versus off chain like exchange rates, right? All of those things add up to like a little bit more marginal demand for block space. And so, and it doesn't have to be a lot, right? I think it's in the 20s in terms of GUI pricing. At that point, ETH becomes deflationary. So net new issuance becomes negative. So this is pretty interesting, right? It's just flipped to being inflationary again as of like a couple of days ago. But there's this really cool website called ultrasound.money, where you can look at like how much like net new ETH has been issued over like since the merge, right? But you can also click a little button that says simulate proof of work. And this is a pretty striking visualization, right? So when you click this button, it shows you, net new ETH issuance has been around, I think it's 50 basis points per year.
Okay.
No, sorry. 0.5 basis points per year, 0.005%, right?
Okay.
Half a basis point per year, on average since the merge. Versus before the merge, had we like continued with proof of work, 3.58% per year.
I see.
And that's, I guess, taking into account like the burn as well from EIP 1559, right? So that number is also subject to change. Versus Bitcoin, which is, do you know what percent per year Bitcoin is inflating at right now?
I opened up the chart. So yes, I do know. It's 1.716%.
Yeah, so pre-merge ETH 3.6%, post-merge ETH half a basis point, Bitcoin 1.7%. I find this pretty interesting, right? Because in the Bitcoin space, people talk a lot about miners and selling pressure and difficulty and how many coins are like in the money, out of the money on like an average like cost to mine like basis. And, are miners holding, are miners selling, like who's capitulating, right? But we don't tend really to talk as much about these like supply demand dynamics in ETH, partially because there's like more complicated stuff to talk about. And like when you look at on-chain analytics on ETH, it's like way more complicated than like the stuff that like Will Clemente is doing on Bitcoin, right? but it's also partially just like the mindset of Bitcoin is very, very like constrained supply cap driven, right? It's all about like this meme of like 21 million coins, right? Whereas with ETH, there's all sorts of other stuff going on, and it's more dynamic, and you know, it is a dynamic supply cap, right? But to me, this is something that I don't think like a lot of people have really fully processed, which is that once demand for block space increases substantially, like if we were anywhere near where we were a year ago, this would be a very notable dynamic within the like ETH markets, right? Is that there really is just a lot less ETH coming online for people to sell.
There's just very little ETH online, and also very little demand for that ETH.
But you can see how sensitive it is, right? To like, it'll go deflationary if like demand for block space goes up even a little bit, right?
Totally. Yeah. Very interesting time. Okay. A couple more things, rapid fire round, and then we will split.
Then up only.
Yeah, we all know what happened next. Art Basel's going on right now. A lot of announcements, a lot of Twitter spaces, a lot of like, I don't know, random parties I'm seeing, a lot of good memes. I feel like our audience is not that in the NFT scene, but I don't know, if you are, tweet us or something like that. But something notable did happen. We are very proud members of the Pudgy Penguin community. Join the huddle, everybody. Pudgy Penguins partnered with Sotheby's for a rare NFT auction. How much did it go for?
It was 200 million in total.
Oh my lord. Unbelievable.
Yeah, pretty bizarre to see. Like, who's buying $200 million worth of Pudgy Penguins right now? Like,
yeah, that's insane. I didn't know it was that high. That's actually wild.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Average of 13 grand each. Nice. Okay. Yeah, that's cool.
So you know.
Okay, wait. I think
it's not 200 million.
Less than 200 grand. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, 200K.
Yeah, we don't want to be spreading FUD to our listeners here. Yeah, they only put 10 of them up for auction. They sold for like 4 ETH each, something like that. This
off by like just a few decimal points.
Off by just a couple basis points here. Yeah, shows how relevant that was. But you know, it's cool to see the Pudgies are pumping. Pudgies up to like 3 point whatever ETH. So yeah, this probably means zero to like most people that are listening to this.
Well, I mean, we're almost an hour into the episode. We could talk about it.
True.
Like, we probably won't even have anyone text us like about this. Like,
who's listening right now? It's basically just Vlad. This is what we should do. If you're listening right now, we're gonna mint our very first NFT collection. So if you are still listening, whatever format you're listening on, YouTube, or you know, if you're listening on Spotify or wherever else, like, you can tweet at us, you can leave a comment in the episode itself. We'll find all of them, and you will be the first to receive our decent NFT collection.
Nice.
Yeah, I've been meaning to do that. So yeah, great. Final
nice
thing.
Little alpha leak there.
Yeah, nice little alpha leak. 53 minutes in. Okay, sweet. Final piece of news. We haven't done this in a long time, but you know, France just won their World Cup match today, so I think it's time. Dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun. Macron corner. Matt, take it away.
Okay, our Macron analysis here. So this is, you know, I don't know if it's like officially confirmed, but there's some pretty reasonable sources now saying that several cities in China are going to be relaxing their COVID restrictions, no longer requiring proof of negative tests to do things like go in public transport or like attend like events or like go into like public spaces effectively. No longer running like mass testing like requirements. So these are generally, I would say, probably tier 2 cities. Like they're large, like Hangzhou, Ningbo, Wenzhou, Taizhou, and Shaoxing. I don't know. I don't actually know where Shaoxing is. But Hangzhou and Ningbo, they're pretty close to Shanghai, right? And so you got to think that like geographically, like Shanghai is like around the corner, right? Because if you no longer have to like test in Hangzhou, there's no way that like you're gonna like remain required to test in Shanghai. So could be interesting to see. Obviously, we've seen like a fair amount of like protests coming out or public demonstrations, right? The last week or so, with some fairly heavy-handed like crackdowns on that from the government. But maybe people are being heard is sort of the thing to look at here. And China obviously like pretty committed to this zero COVID thing. That's going to have pretty big implications at a macroeconomic level.
I mean, zero COVID has to be done now, right? Like if they're going to actually open up these cities and not do testing and stuff, like it's zero COVID can't be a thing.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been really a thing in a long time. We've got 7-day average of 36,000 new cases per day. And that's just according to like the public stats. Who knows what the real number is, right? So, you know, it's not zero, it's 30 something thousand. And so at that point, you know, are we going to see like a capitulation?
Yeah. Right? Few more openings than up only. Cool. You got anything else?
No, let's go enjoy the weekend. It's pretty nice out.
Sweet. It's really nice out. Well, that was our recap, everybody, of everything that happened. We'll be back this Tuesday for part 3 of Bitcoin month, even though it's the next month. But yeah, we're staying at it. So
this is a Bitcoin podcast now.
This is now a Bitcoin podcast. Yeah, hit us up for those NFTs. We'll be back in a couple of days. Have a good weekend, everybody. Till then, stay decent.
None of this was financial advice, legal advice, investment advice, or any other kind of advice. If you're looking for advice, you are definitely in the wrong place. Until next time, stay decent.